Hello, I'm Joyce, and welcome to the View of Highland Park. Today we have our three other co-hosts, Suzanne Canman, myself, Joyce Bernstein, and Pam Chill, and we have a special guest host, and Joe Kopsik, and we're going to speak about racism today. That's going to be our topic. Okay, we're going to start with you, Suzanne.
Okay, and the question
is the term racist being overused?
I would like to quote somebody, an author named Joseph Epstein, and he said, according to him, if the country had a national language commission and I was appointed commissioner, the first word I would put in cold storage, filed permanently, away beside the N-word and other prohibited words would be racism. And he said, if you are politically on the left, racism is what you accuse people of who don't agree with you. And if you're on the right, you can accuse somebody supposedly of socialism, said the author, but it doesn't carry anything like the same resonance in moral of the word that virtue does as racism. And he goes on, and just for a second more, is that the word racism has become part of our everyday speech. The accusation of racism slung about with easy abandon. And he said something that Al Sharpton would be out of business, and Cory Booker could not construct a sentence, and the so-called squad of congresswomen would have to argue for the strength of their actual policies, which may not be easy. So the word racism has been really being tossed around. That it isn't like we heard years ago the word racism, and now it's being tossed around, and everybody is saying it, everybody's using it for any little thing. What do you think, Joe, about that?
Well, I think Joseph Epstein is right about one thing and wrong about another. I think he's right to point out that the term racism is a little bit overused, and I think if we were going to get rid of it, then the terms we would use to replace it would be racial supremacy and racial prejudice, racial discrimination, because that's what most of the time people are talking about when they talk about racism. But I think the statement is a little bit tone deaf, because to say that you want to do away with the word racism along with the N-word, that's almost like putting them on the same level. It's like no whole race of people was oppressed and whipped, and were being called, racist because of it. They were being called the N-word, and it's to say that those words are as bad is kind of to ignore the oppression that black people have gone through. So the statement strikes me as kind of appropriate in terms of, the actual term, but a little bit tone deaf.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what are the definitions of racism, prejudice, discrimination, and stereotypes. Joe, do you want to answer?
Do you mind if I get
Pam
that?
Or Susan?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I prepared a few definitions. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
sure.
I figured since we were talking about, we're going to use the word racism and prejudice and discrimination so many times, we might want to define them so we know what we're talking about. Racial prejudices, the definition is preconceived opinions about race which are not based on reason or actual experience. Racial discrimination is preferential treatment on the basis of race. A racial stereotype is a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular race of people, whereas racist kind of means any and all of those things: prejudice, discrimination, stereotypes.
Very good. Okay. Pam, would you like to talk now?
Yes,
about-
absolutely. Yes. Okay, I was going to do number 7. So, is it insensitive to refer to Hispanics as Mexicans or as Spanish people? And should we be careful about using the term Mexican and Spanish to describe Latino, Hispanic, or Chicano people who might not even be actually from Mexico or Spain to begin with?
I just want to add, I've heard a lot of people saying people of color lately.
Mm-hmm.
Remember years ago...
Black and brown.
Yeah.
They're encompassing,
Yeah.
yes.
Years ago, I remember black people were called coloreds, and then it sounded like we were discriminating, so we stopped using the word coloreds. And now it seems like it's brought back in 2019, will probably be 2020 pretty soon, and they seem, because I listen to a lot of people that are Asian, Hispanic people, Muslim people, and they're referring themselves as people of color.
Oh,
And I've heard this many times being used right now on television, especially by, what's her name,
Alexandria
Alexandra.
Ocasio-Cortez,
Yeah.
she uses
Cortez, yeah.
the phrase "women of color" a
Yeah.
lot to refer to the
Right.
four-person squad, the Progressive
Yeah,
Democrats.
exactly.
And I think the term "people of color" is kind of an inversion of the somewhat insulting term from 50 years ago, "colored people." It's kind of like after we've allowed minorities to, weigh in on whether they like these terms and propose alternative terms for themselves, we get to hear back what they'd prefer to be called if they want to be called all something. And to answer the question, Mexicans, Chicanos, Native Americans, Spanish, those are not all the same thing. There might be some overlap, but to lump them all in as Mexican, they might be from other countries besides Mexico. To lump them all in as Spanish, some of them might not speak Spanish, even though they're from a place where a lot of people do. So those categories are not exactly all the same thing, and it might be a little insensitive if you blend them together.
And is it also insensitive to ask people where they're from?
It can be. Kellyanne Conway got in some heat
Oh,
recently,
right.
asking a reporter where he was from or asked his ethnicity. And I think when you get into asking where people are from, and I was saying to you, if they're from America, they'll just say, "I'm from America." And if they're white and they don't have an accent, the questions usually stop there. But if they're not white or they do have an accent, then someone might be a little impolite and inappropriate and keep asking where they're from, which means where their parents are from, which could be a country that they've never even been to. So to suggest that a person is from wherever their parents from can be kind of insulting and insensitive.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned to you today at lunch that my grandson accused
right.
me of being, he said, "Nana, that's a racist statement," when I made mention that we were in a pancake house, and I referred to, I even just said, very complimentary, I thought that the waiters, I said, the Mexican waiters in this restaurant are excellent waiters. I was very positive. I wasn't saying anything negative, and that's when he said that's a racist statement. How does that a racist? Because I should have just probably said the waiters in this restaurant are very good, but I happened to say the Mexican waiters because the waiters were only Mexican, and I referred them as Mexican waiters. Do you see that as my grandson, who's a junior in high school, saw it as a racist statement?
I wouldn't say it's racist. It's definitely not a statement or an expression of white supremacy or anything. But I think, to mention someone's nationality in a public place, it may be kind of impolite. To use a positive stereotype, which is what you did, it's not as bad as a negative stereotype, but if someone overhears it, they might say, they might want to know what you're talking about. And so in general, talking about other people behind their back is not polite. On top of it, you're mentioning their nationality. So it's definitely not an expression of racial supremacy. I don't think he thinks you're a racist, but if you engage in negative
He said it was a racial statement. He said it was a,
Yeah.
a statement.
It could
And
be
what they're
taken
now
that
calling
way.
is what is racial rhetoric? Is that what she had said? Is that what?
Well,
Not
racial
really.
rhetoric I would reserve to more like political statements, but I don't think
Mm-hmm.
she was trying to make a statement about all Mexicans are good servers. She was talking about those people at that particular place.
Right.
But I would also say at the same time, I don't know if you would know. I don't know if you could be sure that they were all like Mexicans and from Mexico. They might
were.
be Hispanic, but
Oh.
Yeah, no,
I wasn't there.
I
so.
know the waiters in that restaurant. I know them by name, and they're all from different parts of Mexico.
What matters is whether they're upset or offended.
Then you probably didn't even have to say the Mexican waiters if everybody was Mexican, unless you were just singling out so people should know who were.
It was
so
just my
good.
grandson. He and I
No,
were
but
just
I mean,
talking.
when you said the Mexican waiters, you might have been trying to tell who you meant by singling them out, the Mexican ones.
well, I was-
But now you say everybody was Mexican,
In
so.
the restaurant.
Yeah.
Not in the restaurant, but the waiters.
In
No,
the
but I wanted to
waiters.
show that, we go out, as the girls' day out, we go out together, we go out together. So we see a lot of different wait staff, and I find that, I was trying to say that the Mexican waiters or waitresses, they seem to be well trained, more so than a lot of the American waiters.
Oh.
Not American, but Caucasian, would that be? See, I don't even know what to say because every time you make a statement, you don't know if it's politically
Yeah,
correct.
or if
And
it's
I said,
racial.
but I see that they're trained very, very well. I know maybe because of their parents, they're trained so
Maybe.
polite, and they seem to get the order straight. But I was just making a comment, a statement. But see, it's very hard. What is a racist statement? What is if you're complimenting somebody? It's very confusing of what to say
Right.
nowadays.
To be
If-
politically correct as opposed to politically incorrect.
Right, exactly what I'm trying to say, yes.
Yeah,
And now
maybe they're
because of the
trained-
word racist is so widespread, we have to sometimes be worried about whether we're using even positive stereotypes aside from negative ones, but also generalizations about any people that it's hard to make a generalization about any group of people. You haven't met all members of any group of people. So I think that's what most people want to be sensitive about, whether it's race, religion, ethnicity, nationality.
Maybe that restaurant trains them well, because we ate at another restaurant just recently, and we didn't think the service was that good. But I don't know if he was Mexican or what he was actually. So it might be just because of where they work, because aren't most of them pretty good there? Yeah.
Okay. As we tape, I just wanted our audience to know that in early August, a gentleman did target a Walmart looking for Hispanic people
Right.
and killed as many as he could as quickly as he could. That being said, aftermath,
Is that the one he even killed his own sister?
No, that was Ohio.
Oh, that was Ohio.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
that was
Did he
yes.
kill his sister?
No, he came to Walmart, and the reason
In
he
the
had said
purpose?
he confessed to it, that he had done it,
He
And-
intended to do that.
intended to do that and to kill as many as he could because they were taking, I guess, jobs away from other people, other nationalities. That being said, El Paso is kind of rebelling and taking a stand against the Walmart attack, and things are starting to change, or at least they hope it will change. They said more El Paso residents than ever before have crowded into a class over the weekend to certify to carry a concealed gun in public places in Texas after this mass shooting of a Walmart store that killed 22 people. And it was from the ages of, small children to, I think, someone in the 80s.
Yeah, but he
was-
killed other people too, didn't
Yes, well,
he? I mean, they were there, so
they were there, but he was targeting anybody who he had thought looked.
Mexican.
And the manifesto
Hispanic.
heavily featured complaints
Hispanic,
about
yeah,
immigration.
yeah.
Yes, and then about the manifesto, obviously, yes.
His motive was clear.
And they believe that it was a sense of urgency to do required training because it hit so close to home. And the vast majority of people at the classes were Hispanic. El Paso was predominantly a Latino city. Police say the accused gunman deliberately attacked Hispanics in the Walmart. And the general manager of a local gun store, Gun Central, which is one of the largest gun shops in El Paso, and the host of the class said that his store tallied double the usual number of sales of guns following the attack, that they do want to defend themselves. And obviously Texas is a concealed weapon.
Oh,
You can carry a concealed weapon
So
to
it brought,
different
it
places.
brought more
yes.
people by, but you're saying it even brought more people to buy guns to
protect
Oh,
themselves,
and,
yeah.
and there was another one in another Walmart after that one, and it was somebody that had he was dressed in fatigues and everything, and he went out to kill people as also, and there was a fireman that was there who was off duty that day, and he happened to have that was in another city, and he had a concealed weapon on him, and he was able to save so many people's lives
Really?
because he got the person right away, and he held him by gunpoint until the police arrived. So, in a way, we're talking about should all guns be taken away from people, or look what happened in this situation. A gun actually saved maybe hundreds of people's lives.
right.
Right.
Were they solo killers in both places? Just the one
Yeah,
person?
as far as I know, it was a solo person. He was dressed and he had a rifle and he had a lot of ammunition with him.
Oh.
And so it was another Walmart that this happens. They have copycat killers.
Yeah,
that
right.
come
yeah,
along.
yeah.
And this was, I don't know if you're aware of it, there was another Walmart that recently but somebody he saved many people because he did have a concealed, it was in a state where they had a concealed carry and he was able to, and he, being a fireman, he knew exactly how to handle his gun, and he waited till the security arrived, the police arrived to protect.
The people that shoot them, do they know they're going to be caught usually or killed? I mean, it doesn't matter to them as long as they got the Spanish first, or?
I think for, as a psychologist, I think that, I don't think that's in their mind. They're just wanting to kill.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if they get killed, fine. If they don't get killed, that's fine too. I don't think
Right.
they have any, I think if they get killed along
They
with
just
it,
did as long as their purpose was done, right?
Exactly, exactly. And then their manifesto is broadcasted or whatever.
Yeah.
If they have a manifesto.
Yeah, and then there's copycats
Yeah.
after that.
Well, I just wanted to mention that gun control is definitely not on the horizon in Texas, where
Oh.
Governor Greg Abbott recently signed into law 9 bills backed by the NRA that will loosen up gun regulations starting on September 1st. One of the law lifts a ban on carrying firearms in places of worship. Because remember, many places of worship.
Oh, yeah, they
Are
have
targeted.
security people
Yes.
at all these
That ban
places.
came after a gunman fatally shot 26 people at a church in Sutherland Springs in Texas.
Yeah, but
So
how
you're
do-
saying they can, that the congregants can carry guns now to protect
Yeah.
themselves?
Another stops landlords from prohibiting firearms on their rental properties.
But schools also, there are schools now also that are allowing the teachers and the professors
Oh,
to
really?
have guns as well.
Although statistically, this is very interesting when this was researched, only 1% of the people will return fire, even if they have the gun.
Well, I think if there weren't so many gun regulations in the rest of the country, we'd probably see more people returning fire, and there's kind of no way to know. And I think it's a good idea that more racial minorities are considering getting armed, getting licensed, and getting guns, because frankly, we have a very racist country, racist history, racist police department. Sorry to use the word racist so many times, but you know, after Trump got inaugurated, I saw gay people, transgender people, socialists saying we should get guns. We're probably political dissidents now since Trump's in office. Everyone should be armed to make the government be afraid of coming and taking all our guns. But I want to make sure we continue the topic about race and not just guns.
Yeah, do you feel that it's devastating or an insult to be called a racist? How do you feel about if somebody called you a racist, and how, you know, do you feel that it would be, you know, it's a 6-letter word that it said it's vicious, stupid, and cruel, and is it devastating to be called a racist? No, it's just a 6-letter word, and it's very powerful. And I know when my grandson said that was a racist statement to me, I was very upset about it.
Right, yeah,
How do
you
you guys
mentioned
feel about that?
I think that a lot of times it could be our, you know, the age group that we're in, what we've heard from our predecessors, where we heard from our parents and grandparents, that we're probably just continuing. We have to stop, you know, if we was something that was ingrained when we were young, that people were, you know, a certain of minority, and you know, everybody had this, and they felt that they were a minority, or they felt that they were discriminated against, maybe because they were immigrants as well, that we can't carry on that tradition. We have to really censor ourselves before we say anything, and, you know, are we hurting someone in some way? Are we stereotyping someone in some way?
Wasn't the word racist used to be only applied for people that, you know, that I know when I was in, you know, in the 40s, and it's our age group here, 40s, not your age group.
not yours, but ours
But
is
it
pretty
was-
close.
Somebody said they were racist. It was really about African, it was called black people or colored
Colored.
people. In those days, it was about them. It wasn't about anybody else, actually.
I think that's mostly because the wave of Hispanic immigration was like kind of mostly in the 90s, and the blacks were the main racial minority in the country at that time. I think that's part of why racism focused on white and black relations so much then. Now it's more, you know, Hispanics, Asians, about everyone.
Oh, also, weren't they called Afro-Americans? They're not all from Africa.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
don't want to be called African American, but they're
no.
not from Africa.
Right.
So what can we, you know, everything's so politically correct. what do we call people nowadays? Just people, right?
Call them their name.
Yeah.
That's what my
We don't know
We
their
don't know their
name.
name.
Hey,
You're
you.
talking
Ask
about
them.
a certain, like if we're talking now about people that are Hispanic or people, you could say again, people of color. What is are these terminology? Is this correct or?
Well,
or
what I
am
think is important is, do these categories matter? I mean, you're a Jewish and a woman. Am I going to make you pick one? And like, there's people out there who are black and a woman. Like, do we have to say they identify more as one than another? And that may be a ridiculous example, but there's people out there who are half Hispanic, half white, or half Hispanic, half black. And the census and other forms, and government forms, are making them decide which race are you. There's classmates of theirs telling them all the time they grow up, you're either white or you're black. You can't be both. And that's part of the racist culture. You know, I don't know if it's around as much anymore, but there's people growing up, you know, being told that they have to choose an identity that maybe they feel like themselves. They don't feel like any demographic group or anything.
A lot of them are like you could be Hispanic and Jewish. You could be Hispanic and Catholic. You know, you could be Asian and Jewish.
When it
Weren't
came out
Asian-
that
yeah.
Weren't Asians called yellow at one time? Yellow people?
I remember when George Zimmerman, who shot Trayvon Martin, when it came out that he was white Hispanic and then he was also Jewish and Peruvian, everyone was confused and they were like, what's a white Hispanic? It's like, well, Spanish people are from Spain. It's a white country. Spanish people came here, interbred with the native people, and he's part Native American, part Hispanic, part white. They exist. White Hispanics are real. It's on the census form.
And they used to say, people from Spain said they were superior to Mexican people.
Yeah, that's a problem. There might be a little bit of Spanish imperialism, like people are concerned about Spain's influence in Venezuela, so there might be some colonialism still going on with that.
Speaking of people being Spanish, I was in the grocery at one time and I started speaking Spanish to the cashier, and she was looking at me. It turned out she was Eastern Indian. She looked the same.
See, so then they probably would think you're a racist by doing
Yeah,
that.
oh, of course,
See,
she didn't
it's
answer
very
me.
complicated. I mean, they're even in their own party, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they're not flat out called racist, but recently racism was imputed to them by members of their own party, which must have stung, you know, because of, you know, Joe Biden recently, I guess he, you know, about the busing situation. So, you know, and that was a racist thing too. He felt that they should be bused, and the other groups in the same party felt that they shouldn't be bused. So even in one's own party, they're calling each other racist.
And they're hurting their chances for the whole party by complaining of
Right,
things.
right.
And a lot of people are asking, why are they doing this circular firing squad? Why are the Democrats attacking their own?
Yeah,
well, what they're really
yeah.
doing is it's the progressives trying to get control of the party because they don't want the centrist Democrats to push too much Republican influence and legislation on them. They want to they want the Democratic Party to be really progressive, really focused on the needs of minorities and women and gays and everything. And they feel like people like Biden, some people even feel Kamala Harris, like she's a prosecutor, she's too centrist for me. But you know, I'm glad that Kamala Harris called Joe Biden out, because it's not only that, you know, Joe Biden had an unpopular position 40 years ago, it's also that he's been in office for 40 years. Everyone in this race almost is younger than him. You know, we might want to look at some of the other people besides just this old frontrunner.
And then they said busing, she should have been happy because they got a better education than going to the schools in their area by being bused.
Well, and Suzanne and I, we had some difficulty understanding this. It was that I think Kamala Harris said she was the part of the second class to be bused across town.
Oh.
So Biden was against busing, and Kamala Harris, I mean, she was a child at the time, but now she's for it, criticizing Biden for having been against it. So I think some people are confused and they think that he supported it. But there was also some, you know, Biden will say there were some complaints about from black families at the time about their kids being bused across to white areas. Now, I don't know how prevalent those complaints were, and, you know, it was 50 years ago. I don't have all the details, but it's something that should be discussed because it can't be discussed now. It can't be discussed back then because we can't go back in time with the social context and understanding that we have now. So we have to discuss past events with today's social understanding, and it might look like we're trying to racist shame people a little too much and be too critical, but it's an important discussion to have.
Yeah, because what happened then was different. The schools now are more, I think, more, the children in the black schools, they have better teachers, they have better institutions, and they get to go to different types of schools now. There's all kinds of schools that they can go to, you know, and back then it was different. It wasn't good schools, the teachers weren't good. I mean, you have to look at, you can't compare sometimes, it isn't apples to apples. You know, a lot of times it's apples to oranges, and, you know, people don't realize what happened in the, you know, say in the 70s and 80s was a completely different situation
Yes, they should
than
be.
is today.
They should be talking positive about their own party, not going back so many years and complaining, I thought,
You know,
anyway.
they're bringing all these complaints from yesterday year up.
Yeah, yeah.
And they shouldn't be the comparison isn't there anymore.
No.
It's hard to understand it unless you were there.
Yeah.
So much has changed since the 70s. I mean, it's just education has changed. The way we look at everything has totally changed.
But a lot of the politicians are still
Are they talking about
comparing.
affirmative action as well? Is that part of?
That's not a big discussion these days. Kind of was 10, 15 years ago.
Right, it was then.
And I had it in my notes how some people view affirmative action as kind of racism against whites, like it's a way to tip the playing field and the other way to give non-whites an advantage. And the people who are against that, the people who consider that racism against whites, they are concerned. What their idea is that they think that, you know, blacks have had all this time since the civil rights movement to get ahead economically. But really, if you look at things like the effects of redlining still exist, like Google image search, you know, Milwaukee race map, Chicago race map, you'll see how the effects of redlining still affect
What is
people and
redlining?
posterity.
Can you explain that?
Redlining is discrimination in housing designed
Oh.
to negatively affect minorities. And also Oregon, until just like 1997, they had a no blacks allowed policy. They tried actually several times to repeal it, so it's not just that this was an old law
Really?
hanging around. Oregon had a law until 1997,
Wow.
the NBA no blacks allowed law, that literally allowed the police or the state to whip black people until they left. That was the law 20 years ago.
Well,
So-
20 years ago was also, it was no, to rent an apartment or rent a house or to buy a house, there was no Jewish allowed
Yeah.
either. No blacks, it didn't say the word blacks, it said no, I think no coloreds, no Jewish, Jews allowed. So Jewish people couldn't, like years ago in Kenilworth and Winnetka and Wilmette and Evanston.
Forest.
And Lake Forest, they couldn't live there unless they, you know, that's why West Wilmette became popular. And even, so there was that was discrimination, and people don't talk about that.
Yeah, some of
but
the-
that existed.
They said in the ads, they'd say near churches, so the Jews would get the idea, you know, the rental ads.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as a realtor, because I also have a realtor's license, you're not allowed to say anything like that
No,
as far as
no,
advertising.
no,
But there
not
were
now,
actually,
but
there
they
was
did.
actually, it wasn't said. It was posted.
It was in the ads.
actually-
I read it in
or
the
it was
ads.
it was on the window of the house when it said rentals available, or you know, and that was it was posted.
So if Jewish Americans have only had 25 years to choose to live anywhere they want on the North Shore, and blacks have only had 50 years to have any kind of financial success, then is 1 or 2 generations, and that's what we're talking about, is 1 or 2 generations really enough to get out of poverty when your ancestors were enslaved and put in concentration camps? I don't think so. So maybe affirmative action is appropriate. I personally am against it. I think we can find other ways, just reforming the welfare system, give everyone a basic income, bypass the reparations issue. But, you know, there's people out there like Marianne Williamson still talking about reparations. It's an important issue.
Yeah, well, we only have a minute left, so this has gone so fast.
Yes.
That barely have gotten into this. There's
Yeah.
just so much to talk about. Does anybody have a final statement that they'd like to mention?
Well, I guess it's just a matter of what is, you know, it's how do we define racism, because everybody is kind of mixed up about it.
Right.
You know, every time you speak, oh, you're a racist. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's getting very tiring, and I think we need to get rid of that. Maybe that author was correct.
And it
What
doesn't
needs to be
apply.
put aside.
It doesn't apply to who you vote for that you're a racist. I mean,
And you're not, you know, and maybe we need to, maybe that word is being overused too much.
Okay.